Could you eat your way through a dungeon? I am willing to bet that I could if I was given the opportunity. Hey guys, I am one of your co-hosts, Joshua Noel. I am here with the one and only, the beautiful, the almost always right, except for when it comes to learning how to count to one for God moments, Christian Ashley. How's it going?
All right, Joshua, how about yourself?
I'm doing great because we're here to talk about Delicious in Dungeon in like a pseudo-Thanksgiving episode because, you know, I love Thanksgiving and I love food. I'm not usually a big anime fan, but this is so good. But speaking of this is so good, this is one of those things that I feel like I'm only aware of because the greatest podcaster of all time happens to be a person in my life who is the great, the wonderful, the legendary Tiberius of the Juan River, Blackwell. How's it going?
Great.
Yeah, good to hear from you, TJ. All right. And with that, before anything else, we're going to talk about what we're geeking out on lately. And I have something super relevant and weird. I'm so excited. I have been really getting into this book here. It is the Kamogawa. I don't know how to speak this language. Food Detectives. It's a Japanese bestseller. So some of the like proper names and stuff, I just kind of like in my head, I'm like, I know what those symbol of letters represent. I don't need to pronounce them in my head. It's so good though. It's basically like a series of short stories that are also like interconnected and recreating meals from people's lives and going even to like the minutiae details of like, hey, nostalgia is actually what makes them think this food's so good. So we actually need this correct water because it has a certain hardness to it that they'll associate with the food feel. And without that, they won't have that nostalgia. And it's like so detailed and it's just so good. Like, I'm like, man, this is incredible. If you're just like thinking about food, like what we're going to do some of this episode, highly recommend. Great story. And the way it's structured, also fantastic for ADHD folk. Christian, what have you been geeking out on lately?
I just recently watched Heretic, which just came out not too long ago, and I was very disappointed in the final product. Had some things to say about religion and faith and other things, but it just left with a very bleak note and a very false theological note. So there's that.
Well, given the title, I feel like you should have expected that. TJ, what have you been geeking on? Like,
I've been thinking about sleep a lot.
Man, I wish I could geek out on that more often.
And season 1 of Black Ops 6 has started, and people who've been listening to our show have been hearing you out of sequence experience this. How's season 1 going?
It's pretty good. It's day 2 of this season. 3.
Mm-hmm. I don't know.
I just didn't feel like saying that again.
But I haven't heard your voice since the season like officially started.
Yeah.
I'd like to know how you're doing.
Pretty good. Prestige.
Are you the best?
I'm like halfway through Prestige 1. I'm not trying to go super fast.
Cool. I'm just in my head. You're the best player at Black Ops 6 now.
Yeah, I am.
Yeah, that makes sense. Hey guys, if you wouldn't mind, we would really appreciate it if you would rate and review our show. If you're on a laptop, go to podchaser.com, rate and review us there. That always helps a little bit more than the other things. It kind of does something with algorithms. I don't know. But if you're on your phone and you're listening on Spotify, hit the 5 stars. On this episode, you can leave a comment. Go ahead and do that for us. Say TJ rocks. That way we know you listened. Apple Podcasts, you can rate and review as well. And if you're on YouTube, like and subscribe. If we get 50 likes on any video, doesn't have to be this one. Just go through, find the one with the most likes. Like that one just cuz. And if it gets to 50, Will Rose is going to frolic through flowers on a video, and we're going to post it, and it's going to be great. Also, things that are great are supporters. You can support our show on Patreon, Captivate, or Apple Podcasts. And one person who supports our show that we really love and respect and appreciate is the one and only Dr. Trip Fuller. Shout out to you, man. We love you. You rock. Hope you enjoy us nerding out on some food anime. Fantasy anime? Fantasy food anime. I don't know. This is weird. We're jumping in. First things first, this show is strange. We're going to get into what the show is, but it's like culinary arts meets fantasy, Dungeons and Dragon, anime, and you have all this like mixture of just stuff. What all are we bringing to the table? And I just love that because that was not intentional. What do we bring to the table when we come into this? Like, what are y'all's experience with like D&D, culinary arts, adventuring, camping, anime? Like what is it when you watch this that you think is relevant in your own experience? Because it could be anything. I was surprised by how much my camping experience informed how I watched the show. Christian.
Yeah, as mentioned a couple of times before on the show, I got into D&D in college, started with 4E, and moved on from there to 5E, and just wrapped up a campaign called the Netherdeep with some old college friends. They're about to start a new homebrew campaign from one of the other players there. So that's always been a huge part of my life ever since college. Culinary arts, I'm a miserable cook. I've gotten better over the years. I'm just really bad with my hands and I'm really bad with patience. So I'm an instant gratification kind of guy. So going out to grab something to eat or, sticking something in the microwave or oven, that's my way to go. Adventuring, camping, it's been several years since I've done it, but I do enjoy small periods of time, a couple of days, going out in the wilderness. Other than that, I start losing my creature comforts and air conditioning and, modern plumbing. So I'm done with that. Anime has been a part of my life for quite some time, ever since, Dragon Ball Z came out. I've been an anime fan. So yeah, all those things kind of made this anime click to me.
Yeah. Have we ever told you about a little place called Cumberland Island? You should go camping with us. Anyway,
I didn't know you, yeah. Yeah.
we need yeah. We'll talk more off air because I don't want to let anybody else in on the secrets because it's already hard enough to get camping reservations these days. TJ, what relevant experience do you bring to this show when you came into it?
Yeah, it's pretty much the same. It's not like your classic high fantasy. Like playing D&D doesn't like warm you up for this really. Uh, it does make it a little easier. It is, built off of sort of a traditional fantasy kind of standpoint. But I started playing D&D like right before college, late high school. So that's been a part of my life for a pretty long time now. Not as long as you guys are old. Technically, I am a professional chef. Technically, so that is pretty relevant. And it is, I've always loved cooking. It's really fun to see what they come up with for this show, especially reading it. And you get the recipes. The recipes are in the manga. Just the ingredients are kind of hard to find.
Just a little bit. I've yet to find many mandrakes outside, but I still look. No, I find it really strange. Again, like the camping part to me, I wasn't expecting just because I've done some pretty long hikes before my accident, and I know like from personal experience, the less you can pack, the better. You don't want all that weight on you. So if you have the ability to like cook yourself and like catch and like kill your own food, that makes life so much easier. Like so much easier. And I actually do remember one time I spent a week out and my whole plan was I'm not bringing anything but a fishing pole. And I made it work. I had a fishing pole and a couple knives. It wasn't the best food, but I made it work. And it's so funny because like I'm watching this and I'm like, no, all of their logic like totally checks out. Like I'm like, this makes perfect sense. And even outside of that, I care a lot about like ecology kind of stuff and like how the world works and like how we contribute to it or take away from the systems we find ourselves in. So all of that part rung true to me, rung interesting. I've never been a huge anime fan. There's a couple animes I'm really into. One Piece mostly. Also that one Sherlock one. It's pretty cool. And I'm trying to think like what else. I've barely played any D&D, but if like Lord of the Rings and you're like just know your general fantasy classes, that's really all you need to know going into this. I feel like it does help if you know like some typical things about dwarves and elves and stuff. And then I guess technically I'm also a professional chef. I don't really think of myself like that, but I have always found myself really interested by ideas like how does certain types of water or different kinds of the same ingredient really infect our foods. I've just always found that interesting. And I do remember when I was doing chemistry, we learned a lot of what we learned. We did learn through food because cooking is chemistry, basically. So just kind of a good way to visualize what you're learning about if you're doing chemistry. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
The sustainability portion is like surprisingly relevant too, and like a really fun addition to the story.
Yeah. It might actually be my favorite part. I'm unsure, but I like the sustainability stuff. I'm like, that was just excellent.
Yeah.
It's like, for me, it's like, every now and then you do that. Like, this will happen in comics where like there's this kind of thing in a story that you just take for granted, and someone exploits it and goes, actually, what if that doesn't make any sense at all? It's also something I like about The Last Jedi. Because like, oh, wait a minute. Couldn't we just use light speed to, like, I don't know, obliterate other ships? And you're like, that makes sense. Or like, hey, what if people just ran out of fuel? And you're like, totally cap. There's also a lot of nonsense in that movie. But I'm just pointing out some of the stuff I do like was when they did that. And I feel like that's what this story does, where they're like, hey, you ever wonder just how do people survive in these dungeons? Like, what are they doing for food? And you're like, come to think of it, excellent point. And that's kind of like the premise that drives the story, I feel like.
Yeah. Well, our little group is different, but most people aren't willing to eat the monsters. But
I think I would. But Christian, before we get into it, could you just kind of bare bones? We already kind of hinted at it, but if you could explain what the show's about, not the plot, just like what is this show about? Because like people are like Delicious and Dungeon, that sounds weird. It's still weird, but
it's about an adventuring group who, after one of their ends up being consumed by a dragon, has a very limited amount of time to where they can go and find what is remains of what is our main protagonist's sister, who is one of their clerics, and they're rushed to go find her, but at that same time realizing we don't have the money, we don't have the supplies, so how we do it? Well, we got this cute, cool little dwarf guy over here who knows how to cook monsters. So he's going to teach us to get rid of our prejudices as it comes to food and join together as a party so we can try and find Fallon? Phelan?
Yep.
I forget names. Fallon.
yeah. I actually, TJ didn't bring it up, but I as I was watching it, I was like, I wonder how much of like, because I ask TJ random questions all the time if I don't know a thing, because TJ just has approximate knowledge of all things. And I had wondered, I was like, with all of TJ's like random approximate knowledge about like biology and anatomy of living things, I was like, I wonder if that when he's watching that, he's just like, yeah, that makes sense, or yeah, that's not how that would work.
yeah, well, they're like fantasy monsters, so
Yeah, but I mean, a lot of it, I'm like,
leeway.
yeah, that's fair. I'm trying to remember how they did it. We'll talk about that later, but the way magic is fueled is through like what's it called, mana?
yeah.
Yeah, and whenever they would prepare certain dishes to try and restore someone's mana, like even the chef, sorry, Senshi was like, hey, if you cook it that way, most of the nutrients are going to go out. That's probably how magic would work too. So let's cook it in a way that preserves that. And you're like, man, that makes so much sense. I hate it. But yeah, TJ, obviously I'm getting excited and I'm talking around us. Could you kind of lay out the plot as far as like season 1 in the Netflix season, or I don't remember how many volumes of the manga that is. I think it's like 8.
Yep. So no, but season 1 of the anime, which is what we're all gonna watch. The anime is fantastic. For a lot of series, I don't read it and watch it. Usually, I'll watch it until I get caught up, and then just read the manga. This is different. The anime is gorgeous. After reading the entire series, I was like, yeah, I'm gonna watch the anime too. But basically, Christian covered it a little bit. Our party, in their quest to clear the dungeon, they get accosted by a red dragon. And the red dragon eats our main character's little sister. The rest of them escape. Most of them quit, and then Laios, our main character, is like, well, I ain't leaving her down there. We got no money, no supplies. But Laios is a little bit of a freak from the very beginning. This was just like a secret fantasy.
A little bit is underselling it.
Yeah, so he's like, no, I know exactly what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna eat all the monsters. That's my supplies. I don't need money. I don't need food. Food is there. And then he just gets super lucky because he's not a good cook. No one is. Everyone abandons him. Splits off, do their own thing. One of them splits off to, set out on their own quest to save Fallon. But that's different. And then on the first day they set out on this journey, they get a walking mushroom, kill a walking mushroom, giant scorpion, to eat, and they are horrible at it. They are awful at cooking, and they just so happen to run into the only other person in the world, really, who does know how to cook monsters, because he's been doing that pretty much his whole life. He just lives in the dungeon. So they get super lucky. They get paired up with Senshi the dwarf, and Senshi, Laios, Marcial, Chilchuck, and then later joined by Izutsumi.
Yes.
They go on their little adventure, just save Fallon. Season 1 takes us all the way through from their beginning up to getting to the Red Dragon, fighting it, killing it, and we'll explain this in a minute, but assembling Fallon's bones to resurrect her. And that going, spoiler warning, horribly wrong.
What?
Horribly wrong.
Yeah.
So I was actually kind of surprised. I thought season 1 would stop there, but season 1 does keep going. We see Fallon's resurrection, corruption, and then it takes us all the way to it's way more than half the story. I feel like season 2 is going to be short. They're just going to drag it out. I don't know.
I think it leads off at chapter 52 of the manga, somewhere thereabouts.
See, I get
56.
confused because I was reading them by volumes and not chapters.
Yeah.
So I know it goes way beyond the first 5 volumes, which I think is there's 5 chapters per volume. It goes way past that.
Yeah, it's usually 7.
But where it ends, they finally have a perfect plan. Because part of what went wrong is Fallon's morphed with a monster. So now the plan is we'll just eat the monster parts, and then she'll just turn human again.
Yeah.
Basically.
Yeah. Which, I mean, it made sense.
I mean,
as far as
the way
what
their
they
revival
understood,
stuff
that
works.
made sense
Yeah.
to me. But we do get them going past that, and then realizing that they have to now clear the dungeon to actually save Fallon. So they're kind of back onto their original quest with Fallon in their way as a servant of the Lord of the Dungeon.
Yeah, which Lord of the Dungeon subplot is crazy. Because, you're going through and it's oh, this is just a quick rescue thing. And then you're oh, wait, but there's also, a magical overlord. And there's also some stuff going on over, on above the dungeon and, the real world where people are, trying to stake claims and, territory fights and dwarves versus elves stuff. And you're oh, this is way more than just some people running through a dungeon and eating some stuff.
Yeah, I feel like the stakes just get really, really, really high.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Pretty much right after they save Fallon.
Yeah, it was really weird because the beginning of the story up until they save Fallon, like you said, the first time they save her anyway, it felt like there wasn't really any stakes. This is just kind of silly and fun, and I was this is great because if you die, we'll just bring you back, no biggie. And I'm cool, no stakes, just fun eating things. And then I'm oh no, there are stakes. There's actually huge stakes here. That's way more than just can someone die and come back. And you're this is wild. The story got really wild.
Yeah. It's a really
Yeah.
good escalation, I think.
I think it's fantastic, personally. I don't want to say too. I actually don't want to ruin it. But some of the on-planet stuff, and we're gonna get into it a little bit because it has to do with the sustainability and ecosystem stuff still. But before we get to all of the fun other stuff, the deeper stuff that happens in this silly D&D cuisine show, if you had to rate this 0 to 10, Christian, how are you rating Delicious in Dungeon, or Dungeon Mishi as you like to call it, because you're a manga nerd?
Meshy.
I flip-flop between the two. This is a solid 7.5 for me. The world building is fantastic. There are way better things out there, TJ. You can give that look elsewhere.
7.
I highly disagree too,
7.5.
but
Yeah.
he went first for a reason.
Yes. So I could let you guys go because you haven't watched as much as I have. And like world building, fantastic. Characters, sometimes yay, sometimes nay. Uh, the dungeon itself is really fun. There's just something lacking near especially near the end of the story for me. It's like, okay, we've had our fun, but I'm also ready for the story to be over.
Ooh, rough. And this is only season 1 that we're reviewing.
So I'm
Or
reviewing
you're
the whole
reviewing
thing.
all of it. You're doing okay.
Oh.
I'm just doing season 1 because that's what I've seen, and I tried to read the manga and I realized, yeah, I can't get through the manga. I didn't enjoy it, but I think I
needs
might
them
just not
moving
enjoy a manga.
pictures.
No,
Yeah.
I'm fine with comics. I think it's just like no color bad for me. Like I'm like I just no, like I need something to pop out at me. This is too much. And for me personally, Jinchuk was just way more annoying in the manga. Like I couldn't stand him. I was like I don't want to read anything with this guy in it. But that's just me. Just reviewing the show season 1. I hate to do it. I don't know if I've done this for a show yet. I'm giving it a 10. I like as far as like a single season goes, I can't think of a story I enjoyed more. Like, and I'm not comparing it to other anime because that's not really fair. I'd only compare it to One Piece, and it's not as good as One Piece. But if I'm just like comparing it to like shows in general, it is like it's top notch. Like if I'm thinking of like Disenchanted, I loved that show. It's not as good as this. I love Futurama. I don't think Futurama's as good as this. If you're just like doing story to story, this show was fantastic. This could be recency bias, but I'm like, it was so well thought out. The story was really fleshed out. The way it like ramps up at the end. No, I love it. I'm all for this. TJ,
Okay. I think you're both a little insane.
perfect. As you should.
This show is fantastic. I do think it's one of the better seinen manga out right now. Well, I mean, it's finished. It's not really out right now. It's just out. But like just season 1, it's easily a 9. Whole series for me is also very easily a 9. It's great. I don't really understand Christian's problem with it. There aren't any giant robots, so like I can see where that might interfere with
There's
Christian's
only
taste.
one of those in my top 10.
Yeah, Christian and his Gundam fascination.
And it's not even Gundam. That's not even in the top 20.
Is it Neon Genesis Evangelion?
Nope. That's like in the 60s somewhere.
I don't even know what we're talking about now.
60s? Okay.
Here's my thing. I can't eat mechs. I can't make my top 10.
Wrong. You clearly didn't watch episode 7.
That's actually, I'm going to talk about that later. the living armor. God, that was great.
Was that
Sorry.
7?
I think so. I don't know.
It wasn't. Nope. I'm
Darn.
wrong. Wrong and dumb.
And I was wrong.
Were you
There's
close?
2 mecha anime in my top 10.
Also wrong and dumb. Okay, anyway.
All right.
So we got through
It's
our
great.
ratings.
Real quick, I do want to know what 2 those are.
Gunbuster and Gurren Lagann.
Those are both really good.
I'm not even interested in what they are. Sorry, Christian.
It's your
Anyway.
name.
So we are going to talk a little bit. We got 3 big things I want to talk about: how death works, how magic works in this dungeon place, and the ecosystems, like the sustainability storylines. And yes, we are going to tie it to Thanksgiving. Don't worry, guys. It's my favorite holiday, so of course I was going to make it happen. But first, TJ, could you explain to everyone, and maybe even me, because I think there's sometimes that I felt a little confused because they were like, "Souls are like eggs," and I'm like, "Hold up." Could you explain like how revivals work in the show, how death works, and like why are they just like, oh, okay, yeah, the first time I died? You're like, wait, what do you mean first time you died?
Yeah. So basically, in this world, you can die like normal. Like outside of the dungeon, you die. That's it. Good job. The dungeon, part of the curse that is afflicting the dungeon, affects the passage of time. And it gets weaker the farther out from like the main castle you go. But one effect that permeates the entire dungeon is on your soul. Souls aren't allowed to leave the dungeon. So instead, which also implies an afterlife, they don't really explore it in the show. But like it's implied. But dying in the dungeon, your soul is tethered to your body. This is part of the curse. I think it has to do with, part of like the timelessness aspect of the curse specifically. But, things unchanging. But your soul remains tethered to your body, and depending on the state of your body, which is, say, like dismemberment, disintegration, the tether can grow weaker over time or just be weaker because of the state of your body. Like Fallon, they got, I guess lucky's not really the right word. They were definitely the right people for the job, but
Freaks. Sorry.
Yeah.
All I'm going to say, they're freaks.
yeah,
Pretty
but
much.
it's really like
Yeah.
that, and there's like a whole economy based off of it. People retrieving corpses, getting paid for it, making corpses to retrieve and getting paid for it.
Some people just traveling around charging people for revivals.
Yeah,
Hey, you're alive. You owe us the money now.
yeah,
Yeah.
just happens.
Yeah. I mean, that's pretty much on point.
Yeah, there's I will say there's revival magic that some people can learn. You do kind of have like a natural affinity towards types of magic, so not everyone can just learn revivify like it's 5th edition. And just bring you back at 1 hit point. Most people don't have the means, so they just kind of carry the bodies back up to the top level and get, I don't remember what they're called, the people in charge of such things, to revive the body.
It's like the Department of Revivals or something. There
something
is
like
like a
that.
department.
Retrieval,
they
or
go to.
I don't remember.
Yeah. But the
Probably body retrieval.
Yeah, probably. No, it is interesting too, though, because it's like the soul is tied to the body, which you have to just accept in this world that soul and body are two separate things. Which I'm not. The more I study metaphysics, I'm like, I'm rethinking some of my positions on some of that because it's hard to come to philosophical conclusions that make sense with that. That's a different discussion for another time on my Kingdom Hearts Substack. Follow that. But the like. If the body is destroyed too much, the soul can't be revived because it was tied to the body. So you have to have the body intact enough, in theory. Then there's that one time that somebody got ate by a dragon and like digested, and they like put bones together, and it was pretty weird. It was pretty weird. But did you guys ever feel like, and I mentioned earlier, like I did at first, then later less so, that like this belittles the idea of death, or like it takes the stakes out of the story any or anything like that?
No.
No. I mean, like what we talked about before. I mean, dying is something that happens frequently in the dungeon. It's got its own little special magic that makes it easier to come back to life as opposed to if you died elsewhere. But at the end of the day, it still costs you something, especially if you're retrieved by one of those people. Well, you have to forfeit some of your treasure, and that's something you fought hard for. It's something you literally died for, and stuff like that is all over the place. And of course, when it comes to Phelan's resurrection as well, it's not simple. It's done in a way that has a huge cost in the story of how the heck are they going to free her from how they ended up making her without intending to do so. So, yeah, I think at one point in time, everyone's died, some people multiple times over, but it's not like, say a Dragon Ball where, all right, well, I guess everyone died again. Go grab the Dragon Balls or the Namekian Dragon Balls or the Super Dragon Balls or what have you.
Or the Demon Realm Dragon Balls.
There are costs. Or the Demon Realm Dragon Balls. Thank you, Daima, as we continue on through that. So, yeah, there's still stakes, even with death not being as permanent as it could be at a different series.
Yeah, I mean, I'm of two minds here, because at first, really, the way they talked about it, I'm like, why wouldn't you just like have another person in your party whose entire job was to go first and then die? And you're like, all right, so that's the dangers in this room. Revive the guy, and keep going. For me, what really changed my mind on some of that, where I was like, wait a minute, death is meaningless now. Two things. One was when you realize that magic's expendable. So whenever Marcel had to have more mana because she couldn't conjure up her magic to do stuff, and I was like, oh, so you can't just like endlessly revive somebody. Magic is something that can run out, basically. So that changed some of it. And then, to an extent, I do think it kind of warped their perception of death. Because the whole time, Laos? Is that how I say his name?
Laos.
Laos, yeah. Anyway,
We're gonna mispronounce
he was
everything,
very
though.
nonchalant about everything. He was like, man, I'm hungry. And then his sister got eaten. He's like, darn, I got distracted. And he goes back like, we're just gonna bring her back, no biggie.
That's
Then
because
you
he's a
s-
freak.
He is a freak. But
Yes.
but you saw there was that moment though, like whenever they found out that she was completely digested by the dragon, that he freaked out because the whole time he was like, we'll just revive her. And then he realized they might not be able to, and like his reaction to that. So you see, like their perspective on death has certainly been warped, but the stakes aren't gone. That would be
Right.
kind of how I would word that.
Yeah, there's also part of it too is like how much of your body is left intact. I think that when they'd use like the 13 out of 13 rule or something like that, if you divisions, and the less that you have, the harder it is to bring you back. So that raised the stakes too.
Right. Well, their hope was that, since like it's dragon like hunting patterns to eat and then sleep, so she wouldn't be digested. She would just be kind of chilling in the stomach because the dragon ate her and went to sleep. They were just wrong.
Yeah,
That's not what the dragon
terribly
did.
wrong. But yeah. Anyway, I did want to move past death because we have some other really big things to talk about. One's like the ecosystem, like the sustainability through line we see here. Like you both have like on the micro level of like how the dungeon sustains itself with like plant life to animals to bigger monsters, that kind of stuff. But then also there's kind of like a bigger version of that sustainability of how like the dungeon itself is doing something that helps the ecosystem of the planet kind of maintain itself. Christian, could you kind of elaborate some on these subplots when it comes to like sustainability, both in the dungeon and the larger world at hand?
Yeah, because we're just exploring the dungeon. And what this series does do really extremely well is the idea of, hey, how can these creatures exist instead of your typical dungeon your dungeon master makes? Well, there's a bunch of Sahagin in there, or there's a Drider or whatever. Like, well, okay, well, in order to do that, they need to be able to eat. They need to be able to have a place to sleep and an environment that would be suitable towards them. But you don't really think about that too much. This series does, in the sense that, okay, well, they've got to have a sustainable population. They've got to be able to reproduce. They've got to be able to eat. Well enough so that they prey on each other. Are there actually other animals inside that they can feed off of? And one thing that Senshi is very big to bring up is like, hey, like we are here to kill monsters every now and then, but we can't kill every single one of them because they are uniquely a part of the environment of where we're at. So when you take out a super big predator, that means other predators and other prey species are able to proliferate a lot more than they would be able to. So just be mindful of that as we're doing this. And yeah, they're going to be tasty, but if we just kill everything that we come across, we're ruining the environment here. And as far as I can't remember exactly how it affects the planet itself. TJ, can you help me on that one?
Yeah. So there's like latent cursed energy in the planet or something, and dungeon breaks just kind of happen. Like this dungeon isn't really an isolated incident. It's just the one that our story is about, and not all dungeons are the same, but they seem to be like a necessary part of this world.
Yeah, there's also
like
kind of
that.
like a, from what I remember, there was also kind of like a financial part of like the sustainability,
Oh, that's
and even
what you're
like
talking
more
about.
than
Yeah,
that too, because there's. Oh, sorry. Did you want to?
yeah, yeah. Because there's a huge financial part of like people. There's an incentive to go in there because there's magical items you can find or different uh, things for spell casting or what have you that have value on the surface. There's treasure down there, so it's created entire economies around where dungeons spring up, so that a town will form and guilds are formed and adventuring parties form. That means well they need places to stay, so there's hotels and inns and places to eat that wouldn't have existed if the dungeon itself wasn't there. So it's actually helping revitalize the economy of the areas where these dungeons happen to be in, even though there's a huge threat.
Yeah, and there's a few times where like it even hints that some of like the kings and stuff are like intentionally causing dungeons to be created because it does help that kind of part of their own society. Um, you know, I can imagine President Trump coming out with a, "Hey guys, I'm opening up a new dungeon, new jobs. There's a dragon."
Yeah.
Totally makes sense. I'd be here for it.
Like I feel like as far as presidents go, he probably would take the most advantage of it.
I think he is the most likely president to open up a dungeon.
Yeah.
I
But-
can't say anything against that.
If it turns out like Mammoth Caves is just filled with demons and
Dragons, yeah.
dwarves and griffins and
Also,
stuff.
I'd go.
I'll be the first one to go out of all of us.
Oh man.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway,
Sounds convenient.
yeah, all that stuff is interesting, and just kind of how like humans do play part of it. Something I'm harping on ever since a recent Poison Ivy comic that I'm about to record an episode about. Not sure what order those release in. I might have be talking out of time. Sorry, guys. Wibbly wobbly, you know, that kind of stuff. But as far as like this goes, like, did it make you think any of like how we actually have responsibility to the ecosystems we find ourselves in, like in real world? Because like for me, the big one where like all this started standing out was Sinchi with the golems. Where it's like, oh yeah, he's just been growing plants in the golems because like that's really good dirt. It holds itself together, you know. And then he's using that for like his food, and then he's feeding the orcs, and the orcs are keeping certain monsters at bay. And you're like, wait a minute, Sinchi's just like keeping everything together, man.
Yeah.
Do you feel like we have a responsibility to be like the Sinchi of our area? You know.
I feel like Senshi is basically Johnny Appleseed.
True.
Like
accurate.
Senshi's got a pretty unique position in the dungeon because I don't think we quite get to his backstory in season 1. I think
We do.
like
It's right near the end.
okay, so they did cover it.
Yeah, because they eat the hippogriff.
Yeah, he's
Yeah.
special.
He's crazy. I love him. Oh man. Yeah. Christian, what about you? Do you think, like, do we have a responsibility to like the sustainability ecosystems we find ourselves in or around?
Yeah. I mean, from the very beginning, depending on how you look at the timeline, we are told to be fruitful and multiply, but also to subdue and dominate the earth. That is our responsibility as its stewards. That was pre-garden and post-garden, where we are supposed to. We have an impact on the world. Now that our world is filled with sin, now that our world is corrupted, there is something that we have a personal responsibility to do, and that we have to work in the world in order to get things that we like. But if we work too much, we cause harm to the environment. If we overfish in an area, that means we're killing off an ecosystem there. If we're introducing too many microplastics into the area, we're still figuring out exactly what that means because we just don't know, because we weren't thinking ahead of how that affects the human body and other animal species. So we have a moral imperative to take care of the earth, and anyone says otherwise hadn't read their Genesis.
Yeah, I agree. Also, fascinating Doctor Who episode on microplastics for anyone's interested. It exists. But yeah, I agree with all that. I'm probably a little bit of a weirdo with all this. I also feel like God designed everything in a perfect system, and then he was like, hey, keep the system going. So one of the big things, like, well, there's a few things I care about. One, I care about habitats that are trying to reintroduce animals in areas. I find like the study of all that interesting. So I think it was the gray wolf, but like certain parts of like southern Western America, it had completely been lost from the system. And they're like, oh, we want to reintroduce it. And someone was like, oh, we'll just dump them all there. It's like, nope. You just suddenly introduced them all. That will kill everything. Them leaving also caused a lot of life to be lost and to die. So it's like you need that predator for more life to actually happen, but you can't introduce them all at once. And like, how do we work through that? And that's where some of the AZA accredited zoos and stuff are actually helping fund and participate in that research and making it happen. And that's something I care deeply about. That's why I support my AZA zoos, and zoos that aren't AZA accredited should all be shut down. But that's just me. I also, another thing that like I advocate for, and I actually wrote my senator about this, I really want all states to allow what's the word I'm thinking of? Compost, yeah. Composted bodies. I want my body to be compost when I'm gone because, well, ashes, whenever you burn your body, that actually just harms the environment. No reason to do that, really, other than it's cheap. Burying my body doesn't do any good at all. God designed the system for my body to return back to dust and to dirt, and that's what I would like it to be. I would like it to be rich dirt that allows life to continue, for the cycle of life to keep going on. So that's something I care about. I wrote my senator because a lot of states it's not legal to compost bodies yet, and I want it to be.
I could put you in the yard.
See, that's all I want. I just want TJ to plant something interesting in me.
Yeah. Man, I don't know
What a
it was,
sentence.
but when Josh died, his butterfly garden really took off.
That's actually what I want, like low key. I want to be a butterfly garden. Oh man. Any other notes on like the ecosystem stuff? I had another question to go with it, but I don't want to move on until y'all are ready.
Yeah, it's done so well. Like world building and like the interconnectivity of the world is something that they do so well in Dungeon Meshi. It's really fantastic.
Yeah, it's really the ability like world building in general. I'm always impressed with. I always think it's cool. But when your world building is like self-sustaining and like you actually can see all the interconnected parts and how it makes sense, you're like, oh man, that's just incredible. So well done.
Yeah.
Um,
And even the silly bits where, they like get back to where uh, the party almost wiped one time, or where they did wipe one time and lost all their stuff to the ice golem, and they see like the pipe of water coming down into the room, and the ice golem, and Senshi's sitting there, and he's thinking, "I definitely caused this." It's like I definitely put the golem's effigy in that pipe and got it washed down here.
God, that's so funny. Yeah, that was hilarious. Well, even like there's a certain kind of mushrooms that they don't eat that the spores actually change what you are. So like they changed race or like different items would change shape. There's like a whole circle thing, and like at first I'm like, oh, that's some weird magic stuff, and then they explain like how the reason it would evolve this way is because it would cause you to be an outsider, and then you would be banned from your thing, and then you would die alone, and once you died, that would just provide a good place for the spores to sprout back up as mushrooms. I'm like, yeah, that's just how nature works. Like it's weird magic, but it's also that's how it works.
No.
Another thing Sinchi does with like the sustainability stuff I found really interesting, and this is just more part of his personality. I feel like he cares a lot about stuff that you don't expect, like the manly dwarf to care about. Like, hey, wait a minute, you're holding that fork wrong, and how you hold your tools are important. And you're like, wait, what? And like he makes a point, like we need to be thankful for things. Like this didn't come from nothing. This came from something. We are taking something from the dungeon that has its own life, that has its own system. Not only do we need to be respectful of that and not overhunt and overkill, but we also need to be thankful for what we have. So he makes a point a couple times, and even other characters do too, of like stopping and having Thanksgiving to be thankful while they're eating and having the big giant meal. I just had to, throw out something about Thanksgiving, and I was like, wait a minute, it's right here. They're literally stopping to be thankful for their food. I feel like, I don't know how you guys feel, there are the Christians who are like, wait a minute, you don't have to pray before you eat. And I'm like, wait, but I kind of like that practice. But I also see a lot of Christians who are just like, okay, thank you for this food. And they don't really mean it. They're just saying it because they feel like they have to. Do you think we're ever actually truly take time to be grateful for our food? And do you think that's important?
Constantly. Yes.
Constantly you think we do, or constantly you do?
Me.
You think it's important to be thankful?
Yeah. And do.
Yeah.
Makes everything better too.
That's true. Gratefulness does make your food better because you're like, this costs something. I eat a lot of meat. That costs a lot of lives. And if I take that lightly, that's on me.
Yeah, I think it's super important to do so. I'm very bad about actually remembering to do it because sometimes I'm not thankful. Sometimes I expect things to happen. We live in a magnificent age where pretty much almost everything is at our fingertips within, a somewhat reasonable price. As opposed to way back in the day, if my plow broke, well, I better hope there's a blacksmith in the village, or I'm going to have to go to the village, a couple miles away to get that fixed. And all that time, I'm not going to be able to get my crops done, or what have you. Or, I don't have ice, which is amazing. I have an ice machine in my room, and whenever I want to, I can pour water in there and get ice that other people don't get, and it just makes drinks that much better. I have something to cool stuff. I have something to heat stuff up with that we just didn't have back then. And yeah, if I'm actually being honest, yeah, I suck at giving thanks because I'm an instant gratification kind of guy, and I need to be better about that. So it is important to stop yourself every now and then and actually say, I am thankful for everything that had to go into what I am receiving right now.
Yeah, not just the food itself, but the people who prepared it, all of the, the workers that had to work the grocery store, etc. All those things. I mean,
Yes,
Yeah.
it was a group project.
yeah.
Yeah. That's why me and my cousin, we just went ahead and like 5th grade and knocked out all of our thankfulness for every meal forever.
Yeah, totally. That's how it works. Yeah, well, and for me, Sanchi here, from all we can tell, doesn't believe in a god. He's like, just because the fact that we are taking from a system means that we should be thankful that we're able to do this and participate and be responsible with it, and it made the food better. For those of us who, like myself, who believe that God's both transcendent and immanent, that means God is in all things, including all of the things that I am consuming, including all the things that went into the ingredients. Like, it's like, God is in this meal, and to not be thankful of it, like it just seems like almost heresy to me. Like, where I'm like, wait a minute, every meal in a way is communion, if you allow it to be. Not like communion, the sacrament, but like there is a form where I am participating in the divine when I am thankful for my meal, and I think that's something important to do. Okay, are we okay moving on from the?
Yeah.
Sure.
Okay, cool. Last big thing, magic. How does magic work here? TJ, just kind of, could you explain like the different kinds of magic? So they talk about different types. They talk about something about mana. We mentioned it on here, but how does magic work in this world? What are some of the different types that people need to know about?
So the types of magic aren't necessarily super important. Aside from, we
I'm like,
have,
wait a minute.
we have pretty much normal magic, which is all like the typical subclasses you would know of if you played, any fantasy game. Abjuration, divination, all that kind of stuff. And then dark magic, ancient magic, ancient evil dark black magic.
Good stuff.
Just a little some that they threw in there that Marcille just so happens to study. It's basically, imagine she's doing her doctorate, doing her thesis on black magic, and it's forbidden. It's interesting. So I don't know. I feel like it gets kind of a bad rap. I'm a dark magic apologist, ancient magic apologist. It's not necessarily evil. It's just commonly used for bad things, like Marcille. I trust her. And then the Lord of the Dungeon clearly uses it for the bad things.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, I do think there's a little bit of like intentional parallelism between Sanchi and Marcille.
Senshi.
Sorry, Senshi and Sanji. Senshi and Marcille. Because you see where he's like, yeah, tools, they can be used for good or bad. You have to know how to handle them, all that kind of stuff. And then she's trying to say the same things about magic. And it's like, so you have a little bit of that almost like yin yang between the two. Which there was a really cool moment where he learned that sometimes magic is necessary. But that moment I'll save for later too. I think the thing, as far as apologetics, what's interesting is there's some kind of substance to the magic here, since it relies on mana. Like, it's clearly not just some kind of like spiritual voodoo kind of thing. Like, there is some kind of physical property to it, or else mana wouldn't do anything. So I find that interesting. And then, like, with the dark magic stuff, I find it really interesting whenever people call her out with ancient. She's like, no, it's not like that. It's not it's actually pulling from life itself. So it's like something about, in her mind, where it's coming from justifies whether or not it's good or evil. And I would love to hear Christians' response to that.
Well, yeah, I mean, I've done that in my own writing when it came to, okay, I'm having these people who are supernaturally empowered. How do I handle that? And in my case, I do invocation versus evocation. Evocation being I am asking something else or even just myself to get something done versus it's an invocation where they are explicitly, since they are aligned, more spiritually with God, asking God to deliver that power to them so that they can utilize that work. And in a series like this, it depends on how you use it. Like, hey, there are plenty of things in this world that can be used for great good or great evil, depending on how you use it. Food is great, but if you overeat food, or if you cause the extinction of another species just to get that food, it's evil. But it's not just eating it doesn't make you evil. Or, if wine by itself is perfectly fine, unless you get drunk, unless you cause problems. And then there's an issue. Then there's sin involved. So with these things, like, they are bringing someone back to life. And if we are capable of doing that with the realms, the bounds that we have been gifted, it is our responsibility to do that. And to do it responsibly. And that would be one thing I think Marcille wasn't responsible enough in how it happened. So there's an issue that was created because of that. it's better for the story that it happens, not so much for morality's sake. So just to think of in that case, just yeah, if something can do this and it is a net gain, it is good is produced from it, it's fine. But be careful of how you do it.
Yeah. And even
Yeah.
if like if if it wasn't such a specific scenario where the meat they used was inflicted with such a powerful curse, would have been fine.
Yeah, yeah. I weirdly enough, I feel like I'm pretty much just completely with Sinchi throughout all of this when it comes to the magic stuff. Where I'm like, you know what? We don't fully understand this. What if we don't use stuff we don't fully understand? That might be a good idea, right, guys? And like even up until
But
like
she
when
does.
I don't know, she's amazing. But even up to the point where he was like, I'm going to trust this creature I know, and like all monsters are monsters, we learn. But I'm still with him. I'm like, yeah, I would have tried that before trying her magic too, because I'm like, I don't know you. I just met you. I don't know how magic works. Seems like there's something behind this that I don't quite trust, you know?
Yeah, but
Just like,
Mana is just pretty bog standard like fantasy thing at
Yeah.
this point in any game at least.
yeah,
D&D does spell slots. That's just mana but fancy
yeah.
Yes.
or
But, I
dumbed
mean-
down even.
I think for me, I kind of think of it of like, if I believe in, I'm charismatic still. I'm Lutheran, but I still kind of believe in like some of the works of the Spirit, you know, speaking in tongues, prophecy, all that kind of stuff. When I meet someone who calls himself a prophet, though, nah, I ain't trusting it. I don't trust a word of that. I'm like, every single red flag went up when you told me you were a prophet. Now, that doesn't mean I don't believe in prophecy. It just means I'm like, I'm proceeding with extreme caution with this individual, you know, and that's just kind of how I feel about magic too. I'm like, look, it's not that I don't believe magic can be good. It's that the moment you come up to me and say you're a sorcerer or you're a witch, I'm proceeding with extreme caution at this point. You know, like that's just kind of like where my brain goes. But it is a tool, just like anything. So, at least in this series, comes to real world, it can be a little bit different. Christian and I will disagree on some of that too, but I'm still treat it mostly like extreme caution. But anything else you think like we need to cover when it comes to like magic or like how we think about like what we use and how we choose to use things when we're on mission?
I mean, mana's pretty much just like stamina here. You
Yeah.
can imagine like the web of mana being like the force and everything. Some things stronger than others.
Yeah. All right. Well, with that, I am going to have to go here in a minute. But before we do the wrap up, I had one big question I want to ask everybody. We do this usually with our Disney, a different version of this, but I want to see what you guys think. Real quick, what is your favorite character, or who's your favorite character? What's your favorite scene? And what's your favorite dish that we see in season 1 of the show or wherever that leads us in the manga? TJ.
That's a really hard question. So much of the food looks delicious, and so much of it
True.
sounds really genuinely awful. Oh my
I've got like
goodness.
3 answers for the food is the worst part. Like there's 3 dishes that stand out to me that I'm like, man, I want to try that.
Favorite character? I'm gonna go with Itsutsumi. She's silly, cat, bunny.
Yeah.
She don't know how to hold the fork. She's a cat. Favorite scene? As far as we are in the anime, I want to say honestly, like the shapeshifters, like relying
yeah.
on Laos to find out who the shapeshifters are. That's great, and it shows like his positive traits. I love it. It's fantastic.
That was good.
Dish wise. I really
It's
want
tough.
to try. I want to try everything.
Yeah. Almost all of it, I agree. There's a few things I was sad about the pizza because I don't like onions.
Yeah, but like I
Still
would,
wanna
I
try
would
dragon
probably
meat, though.
try it all. Favorite thing, probably like the dumplings they make, like the very end of season 1.
God, yeah. Yeah, I was considering the dumplings too. But my question for you is like the dumplings that they make or the dumplings that like at the end? Because originally they make it with like hippogriff or which one was it?
Hippogriff.
Griffin.
It was the hippogriff? Okay. Because I know that like they changed the hippogriff and something. Okay.
Well,
So
they
originally
thought
they
it
make it
was
as
a
that.
hippogriff. Well, they thought it was a griffin, but the griffin
Oh, that's
it was a
right.
hippogriff that had gotten changed to.
Okay. But then they fry the dumplings. And then after that, they use like the changeling spores to change them into like surprise dumplings. We don't know what kind of dumplings we're eating now. So, do you mean the surprise dumplings or the original dumplings?
The original. I don't want to eat a surprise dumpling.
Nope, no surprises. I know what I want to eat. What I'm
Well,
getting.
I'm going to disappoint everybody because I really wanted to say my favorite dish was going to be the living armor because it was like basically like seafood kind of deal, like mollusk.
I don't like
And I'm
clams.
oh, I love clams. I was like, this is going to be great. But I'm a freak. Surprise dumplings, man. I'm like, because some of them are sweet, some of them are cheese, some of them is like different meat, and I'm like, no, I gotta do that. Like as much as like I despise onions, so I know like that's a huge risk for me. Something about the adventure of it. I'm like, yeah, I'm here for that. That sounds great.
No, can't do it. You know how shocking it is to your palate when you're like expecting
Yeah.
to pick up a cup and have a little
yeah.
root beer.
But if I
and
don't
it's
have
someone's
any
lemonade.
expecting,
No.
it's great.
It's like when you're picking up what you think is sweet tea and it's unsweet, or regular Coke and it's diet.
That's because you're
evil.
going into it wrong. If you don't expect anything,
No.
it's great.
Dumplings. You're expecting dumplings.
I expect to eat and drink what I've been given.
I think I'd love it. So that's gonna be my favorite dish. To absolutely no one's surprise who's been paying attention, since he's my favorite character, he just shows up and he's like, "Yeah, I'm gonna help you guys. You guys see honorable," and he's just like taking care of this, sustainability of the dungeon, and he's just like so eco-friendly and like minded about like his habitat. And I'm like, yeah, this is great. That's if I had to like describe the opposite of toxic manhood, masculinity, it's Senshi, and I love that. I want to be just like him. And then favorite scene, man, that's difficult. I'm between two. I'm gonna go with the Senshi scene since I chose him as my favorite character. It is gonna
when you
be
get to see up his skirt.
yes, no, but it's that scene I mentioned earlier. Whenever they have to cross the water, and he's like, "No, I don't trust magic. I don't trust magic." So he goes out to the monster because he's like, "I've been feeding her. Like we're friends. I kind of know the relationship I have with this creature." And then it turns on him, and just kind of like that moment where he realizes like, monsters are monsters. Like I thought I knew this creature, and I clearly don't. And he had to like humble himself to be like, "Yeah, you know what? My way ain't the way right now." And that moment for me, I was like, oh, good character building moment. I love it. Anytime you see like progression like that is a moment that I'm like, that's key to stories, and I love it. Christian, same three. You had to choose my exact same three.
No. Character Marcel. I love. She is
I
me.
could not
It's like,
stand Marcel.
I ain't eating that stuff. It's evil. I want nothing to do with it. I don't care how well you prepare it. I'm done. I just want to look at my magical spells and bring my Finn back to life. I don't want any of this mess. Scene. I mean, I want to say the doppelganger scene is shapeshifter scene, but since TJ
That
picked
was
it,
good.
It's a good scene.
I'll go with like the initial meeting with Senshi and like how Laos is like geeking out on all the different types of monsters and never thinking about, oh man, if we ate them, that'd be even better. And just like establishing what this series is about. I think that's a pretty strong scene. Since I have to choose a dish, I think the cockatrice one had fewer
yeah.
vegetables in it.
What's funny is I almost went with the mushroom dish. Even I like some mushrooms.
That was never on the menu for me. So yeah, I'm a very picky eater. So yeah, those are my takes.
That's fair.
Characters
My
is probably
other
pretty
scene
big
that I was thinking of, the other scene I almost chose, I'm only going to mention it because it's also a good tease for season 2, I feel like. Whenever they meet the character whose name I already forgot, Itsu whatever, I can't say her name.
Izumi.
Yeah. Whenever they meet her and like they realize stuff about the curse and that she still has her own personality and desires, and then Laos, however you say his name, he has that realization moment where he's like, wait a minute, this means my sister might still have some of her humanity. We might still be able to save her humanity. And just that like that moment of hope and like the way they animated it, like you could see it in his face, and I was like, yeah, this is what it's all about. I can't wait for season 2 because of that moment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm glad we all agree. Best scene is Laos's dog impressions.
That was also pretty great. But he just he just basically became a dog because he's that good at impersonating one.
It was really
brilliant.
fun.
Yeah.
It was a really good film.
All right. Well, guys, with that, one up. And as always with our wrap up, we're going to start with the recommendations. Mine's super easy, so I'll go first. If you haven't, you should catch up on the Poison Ivy run by G. Willow Wilson. It's really good, as everything she writes is. And Poison Ivy is also very much about sustainability and ecosystem and stuff, and kind of seeing her desires, what drove her to villainry, and kind of seeing her wrestle with, does she want to be a hero? Does she want to be a villain? And what actually matters most, the planet or humans? It's pretty interesting stuff. Christian, any recommendations for everybody?
Well, I'm also going in the comic sphere, and Batman as well. Absolute Batman, the first two issues have been released, and they've been a lot of good fun. So go check those out.
Man,
All right.
Absolute Batman is insane.
You know, I was going to read it, but I was like, I'm going to start with Absolute Superman, and if I like it, I'll read the others. And I read the first one, and I was like, nope, I'm done with the Absolute series before issue
you
one
should read
finished.
Absolute Batman.
It wasn't even bad. I was just bored. So, yeah. All right, I'll check out Absolute Batman per Christian and TJ's recommendations. TJ, what's your recommendation? Absolute
I
Batman?
was going to recommend Shukugeki no Suma, but not going to do that. I'm going to recommend Shokugeki no Sanji.
Yes.
The
Yeah.
collaborative effort between Shun Saiki and Yuto Tsukada. I don't remember their name. Endorsed by Ichiro Oda, but the it's a little less gratuitous than Shokugeki no Soma. It would just like to look at really good food in manga. If it has to be an anime, then watch Shokugeki no Soma. The food looks amazing. Also, a lot of naked people.
All right. Great recommendation. Well,
Yeah,
guys,
fair warning.
again, rate and review the show, Podchaser, Spotify, Apple Podcasts. Like and subscribe on YouTube. Remember, 50 likes, any video, doesn't matter. Will frolic and flowers for you. Thanks again to Trip, one of our supporters. You also can be a supporter on Patreon, Captivate, or Apple Podcasts if you'd like. And remember, we're all a chosen people, a geekdom of priests.